In this section, we will cover yet another vCloud Air Gateway service, which is really important for us. The firewall service, it obviously provides security, and again, nothing too unconventional. It's very simple to set up. It's quite powerful, and as we all know, it's necessary. So we are going to shift very quickly to the firewall lab. So here we are back in VMware vCloud Air. We are looking at INE VDC2. We want to look at the firewall on the gateway. I click on gateway, it's going to load the list, and obviously there's only one available to us. Now we have the ability to manage the firewall in vCloud Director or in vCloud Air. We will first look at the vCloud Air interface, and then we will take a quick look at it in vCloud Director and see if there are any differences in there. I click on this big rectangle, and it brings me to this screen where I click on firewall rules, and what you can see is a screen that says that I have one rule in place that's enabled. The logging for it is disabled, and its name is all, any source, any destination, any protocol. So basically it's completely opened up the firewall. If I select this by checking that box, I can disable that and look at the actions. Again, I can edit that. So if I click on edit, I can then change those protocols. Let's look at that. You have a choice from any which I have selected. Not good practice, but again, it's okay in this lab session. You can select TCP, UDP, TCP and UDP, or ICMP as your protocols. In terms of the source, this is a little bit interesting because instead of saying any, you can say you only want it from an internal source from within your network, or you can say that anything that is external to your network, that firewall rule applies only for that. In most cases, you would probably say external and have separate rules for external sources. You can specify, if you know the IP addresses or the ranges for the source as well, although that is very uncommon. Most likely you would use the internal or external, and you would avoid the any and the specific ranges as the source. Obviously we don't really worry about the source port because sometimes you never know what the source port is going to be. In terms of destination, again, this is really important, because you could say that any external source cannot talk to an internal. You can disable this, right? Or you can say that all external sources can talk to internal sources, and you can set up different ports and so on. So anyway, that's the interesting part for me, is that when I edit a firewall rule, I can change the destination port, which is kind of intriguing. I'm not sure exactly why this happens in the edit firewall, but that's the way it happens. We will check to see what we can do when we add a new firewall rule. Okay, you can enable or disable this rule. After all those changes, I'm just going to do cancel. So let's just take a look at well, before we do the add, let's look at the reorder. The reorder is really important because the firewall rules are applied top to bottom. Okay, so in our case, the first rule picks up everything, even though the second rule is disabled. So even if we do that, and we can take a look at editing it and see what that rule was. That was an interesting rule, because when I set it up, when I created it, when I added it, I was able to select the source port and destination port, right? And I said that any outside source to an internal destination on port 22 is actually allowed. Okay, kind of a strange rule, but that's what I have. And I also was logging the network traffic, and the logs would be accessible through vCloud Director. Now, how granular this information is, I'm not really sure, because when I went into vCloud Director and looked at the logs directly, didn't see very much, but we can look at that one more time when we go through. One reason, of course, is that this rule is not enabled, so nothing is being tracked, and the first rule catches everything, so that is the likely reason for that. So we are going to create this new firewall rule. We'll call it INE rule. Should use a more meaningful name than that. Need to log the network traffic for this exception, and we can access the logs through vCloud Director. We look at the protocol and we say we allow TCP from any source and any source port, and we allow it to any destination, or we can say we allow it to one of our virtual machines. 192.168.109.2 is one of those virtual machines, and we allow it to, let's say, port 80 only, and we hit next, and basically finish. You can add multiple rules, of course. It's adding the firewall rules up there. You can see that it's doing that, and while we wait for it to actually do that, what we can, it has now been updated, and that's the new rule that you see up here. Of course, you can disable it, and as we said, the logging was enabled, and it allows anyone from any source to come into port 80 for HTTP basically. Now let's switch from this over to the other side, being the vCloud Director interface, and see what we can do there. So Edge Gateway Services for that gateway. That's interesting. There's no reason why it should not, but at this point in time it says to contact my cloud administrator. We are now in vCloud Director. I select the gateway, and I look at the Edge Gateway Services, and we will look at the firewall tab. I click on the firewall tab. The firewall is enabled. Default action: deny, allow, log. So it's obviously much more granular. It has the deny option, which obviously is very useful, which we didn't quite see up in the vCloud Air version of the firewall interface. That's the INE rule that we had created. It shows up here as well. If I select that, let's look at the options to edit it. It's pretty much the same capabilities are there. So by looking at this interface, we see that one of the really good capabilities is this default action of deny that was not really available before. So we can delete the rules. It's easy enough to do. So on. When you click OK, the firewall is actually updated. So there's nothing very difficult about the firewall if you know what ports you have and what either IP ranges or internal or external sources that you are going to allow or deny your access. Then it's very straightforward to configure the firewall. Again, this is all software based. It's all in the services provided by the gateway. So while it may not be the most sophisticated firewall, it certainly provides 70 to 80% of all the capabilities that you would ever need, including the capability to log. If you go into the advanced networking option, that allows you to use gateways from NSX. They are very fast and very powerful as well. In this case, I don't have the advanced option available here, so I've been using the standard Edge option that is provided to me by the on-demand cloud, and it's very functional and lets me do what I really need to do. So with that, we are going to close this section, and we have two more sections left in terms of the services provided by the gateway. One is the VPN service, which I think you'll find really interesting because of the multi-cloud, and then the load balancer, which again it's nothing really fancy, but it does the job, and it's quite straightforward to use as well.